Hello everyone, Dana here. Just going to take you through a few tips on how to create your floor plan, your lighting layout, sheet E2 of our assignment. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to navigate to the floor plan where you have your lighting layout. Now I'm going to do that in model space, but essentially we're looking at sheet E2 here, and sheet E2 is going to include all of our light layout locations. It's going to include our switches, and it's also going to include, room numbers and labels for the circuits as well. First thing I want to do is I want to show you kind of what I've done here that is I've set up a bunch of the blocks that we're going to actually be using in the layout. I've put them to the side just to make it easier for me to copy and paste them into their proper locations. Now I've done something else with these blocks, and I've really created dynamic blocks here. So what that means is I've created these blocks with the ability to be able to modify them quite easily and quite quickly. So for example, the rotation modification that we're able to do here makes it a lot easier. So if I don't need separate blocks in different multiple different directions in order to get this to work, I can just actually grab this block, and if I have an orientation where I need it a little bit differently, all I got to do is just click on it and rotate it into the orientation that I need. Now you'll notice that I also have the polar tracking on. So you want to make sure you turn that on. F10 turns on polar tracking, and that gives you the ability to be able to rotate to specific angles, specific degrees. So 90 degrees, 45 degrees, things like that, which will come in really handy for you actually when you're going through this process. So have your symbol set up. You're going to have a blank luminaire. You're going to have a luminaire with a junction box. That little circle represents the junction box. You're going to have a luminaire that's just simply a I guess this would be our compact fluorescent luminaires. And then you're also going to have a junction box. Now this one here is a hexagonal symbol with text in the middle, and that just represents the lighting type that we're going to be using. So we're going to have A, B, and C for our different lighting types here. That's what we're going to be using for throughout the floor plan. So you want to maybe have one set up. Maybe you want to have an A and a B and a C. I've just set it up so that I can very quickly just double click on it, and it's actually an attribute, and I can just change that to B if I want to, right? And so I can use that whatever symbol I want to make it at that time, the A, B, or C, according to the light type. So A is our LED 1x4 troffer. The B is that, I believe it's that metal halide that's going to go in the shop. And then we have type C, which I believe is the compact fluorescents that are in the hallways. So the other thing I've got here is I've got a single pole switch, and I have a three-way switch. And again, I've got that same rotation configuration for these as well. So depending on which wall I'm putting it on and which orientation I need for those switches, that's the way I've got it configured that I can just quickly change it. I also have a home run here, and the home run as well is connected, so I can point that towards the panel. From whatever junction box that I'm going to be connecting that from. So make sure you read the PowerPoints that are provided for both the branch circuit for lighting as well as the instructions for sheet 2 before actually going through and doing this. Otherwise you'll have no idea what I'm talking about here. And lastly, we have the labels that we're going to be using for all of the luminaires where the junction boxes are. And so what I wanted to show you here is I already have a luminaire that's created with this rotation here. I want to show you how you can do that yourself. Again, this is not really part of this course, but it is something that you might find handy, and I would definitely want to try and help you out wherever I can to make it a little bit easier for you. I just quickly want to show you the layers that we're going to be using for sheet E2. So we have E2 circuit layer. This is going to be everything that has to do with the circuit. So this is going to be our conduits, this is going to be our switches, and anything else that has to do with circuitry, home runs, everything like that's going to be on the circuits. Then we have our lights. So this is actually going to be just the luminaires are going to be on the light layer, and any text that we need to add will be on the text layer. So this should be on the light layer because it is a light. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create this as a block. So we go into Insert, Create Block, and this is to create your dynamic block. So I'm just going to give it a name here, Luminaire. We'll just call this rotatable or something like that. And I'm going to pick a base point. Now the base point that I'm going to select is going to be the midpoint, that point right there, because that's really sort of the closest to where I want it to be. And also I'm going to make sure that Select Open in Block Editor is open, because I'm going to make changes to this right away. I'm going to open it up in the block editor. I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's a little bit funny in terms of the colors. So let me actually just go to my options here, Tools, options, let me just change the colors so that it's a little bit easier to see that. Just give me a second. And I'm going to go to, yeah, colors, the block editor, and I'm going to actually change that so it's a little bit darker. So it's not quite black, it's a little bit darker. And that's going to make it a lot easier to see, but still not quite as black as model space. Sometimes you get a little confused as to whether or not you're actually in model space. So what I did is I'm going to click on the rotation parameter. So I'm going to add a rotation parameter here. I'm going to select the base point. It's asking me here for a base point for the rotation parameter. I'm going to select the same base point as my insert base point. Next thing it's going to ask me for is the radius. So where do you want the little handle to be? Do you want it to be here? Do you want it to be here? Where do you want it? Well, I think probably at the end of the fixture is best for this particular situation. So I'm going to click on that. And then it asks me for the default rotation angle. I'm just going to say 0 here. I'm just going to press enter the default. And so I'm done entering the rotation parameter. Now I need to enter an action. So you want to make sure that this block authoring palettes is showing here. And you want to go to now actions, and we're going to create a rotation action. Now it's going to ask you here for selecting the parameter. Well, that's what we did in the first step, was we selected the parameter. So we're going to select that rotation parameter, and now we're going to select the objects that we're going to be rotating. And once we finish with that, we now have a block that should have that rotation parameter attached to it. So it will allow us to be able to now click on it and rotate it. So there it is right there. So now I can actually rotate that around whichever angle I want. It's pretty free movement, so it's pretty handy to have that. So these are already set up with that, so I don't really need that right now. I'm just going to delete it, and we'll go continue on to actually laying out our luminaires. Spacing for the luminaires. We're going to start with room number 6 over here, and I'm going to show you how to, the best and quickest way, I think, anyways, of laying out the luminaires in this room. So I've brought in my table here, which shows me how many luminaires I'm working with. So this is the total luminaires for that room. Room number 6 tells me I have 18 luminaires, and we've also got a spacing in here. Now, one way I guess you could do this is you could always actually create lines that would be 1.59 meters apart, and you could try and center that in the room. I think that's actually a bit of a long way to do that. So let me show you a quick way to do this. So we know we need 18 luminaires in room number 6. So room number 6 requires 18 luminaires. And we have 6 columns made of 3 luminaires per column. So that's all we can fit in that space. So if we take our actual columns of lights, which was 6, and we minus 1/3, that's 5 2/3. 5 2/3 is the same thing as 17 thirds, right? You take 5 times the 3 and add 2, that's 17 thirds. So we should be able to divide this room, room number 6, into 17 equal segments, and then every third segment will represent one of our spacings. So let's just do that right now. Let's just create a line. So I want to check and see what layer I'm on here. I'm actually going to go to the circuit layer. Not that it really makes any difference, but I just want a yellow line. So I'm going to create a line. I'm going to just draw it from one end to the other. It doesn't matter where I draw it because it's going to get deleted. And then I'm going to do the divide command. So I'm actually going to type in divide, and we're going to select the object to divide, which is the object I just draw. And the number of segments, so it's asking me for the number of segments here. I'm actually going to type in 17 for the number of segments. Now you notice that it's now created a whole bunch of X's here. If you don't get X's showing up on your screen, then what you need to do is you need to go to Format, Point Style, and just pick a point style that's relatively, whatever style you want. If you want a circle, then that's fine, but I would make it, maybe 5% relative to the screen, and that's going to then give you a layout for all those points. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to use the Xline command. Okay, so that's the Xline. That's the same thing as coming up here and going and drawing an Xline, which is a line that's a construction line, and it's really infinite in terms of its length. Doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end. And because I'm wanting vertical lines, I'm actually going to specify here that I want vertical lines. So I'm going to click on that V for vertical, or you can type in V. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually lay out now the sort of the grid pattern that I want, or the pattern that I want for those luminaires. So remember, we have 1/3 spacing from the wall. That means that the first group of luminaires, the first column, is going to be positioned at that location there. So I just clicked to enter that location. The next one is going to be 3 spacings over. So 1, 2, 3, and then I continue on going 1, 2, 3 all the way across. 1, 2, 3. Oops, went too far. 1, 2, 3. And if you've done it correctly, when you get to the end, you'll also be 1/3 spacing at the end. Now let's just double check and count the number of lines that we have, which represents the number of columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 columns, and that's what we expect in that room. So we don't really need this anymore. We can actually delete this now. I want to make sure I don't delete my room name here though. Let me just get rid of these. So now we don't need these anymore because we've already got our spacing that we require, and we know exactly what the distance between these is going to be. If I wanted to double check that to see if it was how close it is to my 1.59, you can see that it's actually pretty darn close, 1.588.24. Okay, so that's exactly what we were hoping for there, but it is evenly spaced. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to position my luminaires in this room. So the first one I'm going to choose is the one that has the junction box. Make a copy of that. I'm going to place the copy in the room. I'm going to rotate it around into the direction that I want, and I'm just going to place it onto this particular line here. I'll just move it down. We don't know exactly where it's going to be quite yet. We need a few more luminaires in order to be able to center those in the room. So now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab this one, bring it over, make a copy, rotate it into position, and I'm actually going to move that and connect it or butt it end to end to the previous luminaire. And I also need another copy of this one, and so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to butt it end to end. Now this isn't perfectly centered. We need to be able to perfectly center that group of luminaires, those three, in that space. So we want an equal space at the ends on either side of the luminaire columns. The way we're going to do that is we're actually going to draw a line from the center of the room. So if I can find a point that's from the center of the room, I'm going to draw a line. I'm just going to draw it straight through. And now I'm going to actually center this group of luminaires to that line. So I find the midpoint of my luminaires. You see it's a little bit off. I was close. I'm going to actually bring it now and connect it. So now that should be perfectly centered there. If we do a measurement from wall to wall, we have 500 on either side. And that's what we would expect, actually. It's 500 on either side. Alright, so I don't need that line anymore. Now I'm going to actually make a copy. Now that I've got this centered, I'm actually going to make a copy with the base point. And we'll just use that as our base point. And I'm just going to basically copy it straight across every single one of these columns. There we go, and now I don't need these lines anymore. I can get rid of those grid lines. Okay, so there's our 6 columns that are laid out. We have a perfect 1/3 spacing on the ends, and we have an even spacing in between. We know that because of the way that we constructed it. Don't leave the room numbers where they're overlapping with the luminaires. Move those room numbers to a better location. So I'm going to move it more to the center of the room. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab the luminaire type, and I'm going to place that in the room. And I'll place it, somewhat near the room name if I want. And now this is a luminaire type A, so I'm going to change that to an A. And there we have the luminaires for our particular room. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in the switches that we need for the room. So we're going to need some 3-way switches for this room. We're going to need a 3-way switch on this side of the door here, and we're also going to need a 3-way switch on that side of the door there. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab my block, which is a 3-way switch. You can see how handy it is having those already laid out. I'm going to place it in the location where I want it. I'm going to rotate it to the angle that I want. Now if you noticed, I've created a base point for this particular block. I've created it in the middle of that sort of extension line down from that dollar or that S there. I've done that on purpose because I want to have a little bit of tail, I guess you could say, on the end of the block so it enters into the wall space a little bit, because when I actually connect my conduit to the switch, I want to connect it within the wall space if possible. So this just kind of helps me to do that. So I'm going to place this just somewhere along, next to the wall. It doesn't matter. There's no specified dimension that we need from the door to the luminaire. It's arbitrary. And well, when I've got one here already, I might as well make a copy of this one. And because I have my rotation parameter configured, I can make it quite easily, move it into place. Alright, let's move it there. I'll just move it a bit closer. And now I've got the switches that I need for this particular room. Next thing we need to do, make sure on the circuit layer while we're doing this, is we're going to create a line, and we're now going to connect each of these luminaires together, the junction boxes for the luminaires together. So I'm going to create lines connecting each of these junction boxes. Now you don't go actually through the luminaires or through the junction boxes, you just connect to the outside edge of them. Right, but we're connecting those together, and now we need to connect these conduits. That's really what that is the conduits between the luminaires. We need to connect that into the 3-way switches, and this is all done using 90-degree segments, using the closest luminaire. So this one here, I don't know, they both look about the same to me. I'm going to actually go over to this one here and try and line this up so that I connect into it. There we go. It really doesn't matter which one you connect to, as long as you connect into one of the junction boxes that's in the luminaire. This one here as well. Let's see. Well, obviously we'll have to go to this one here. So I'm going to line that up like so. And so now I have my three-way switches. The switching will actually go through the conduit into the luminaires from one switch to the other, and then it'll control all these lights at the same time. So when somebody walks into this room and turns on this switch, all of the lights come on at the same time. And then as well, if somebody were to exit using this door, they could turn all the lights off using the switch. So they all have to be connected through the junction boxes for those luminaires. So you're going to do that for every room. Every room you're going to lay out, and you're going to put the switches in, and you're going to connect the switches to the junction boxes, and you're going to connect all the junction boxes together. You're going to do that for every room. And when you're finished doing every room, you're then going to decide which circuits are actually going to be on which luminaires. So I'll give you the first one here. So I'm going to take this circuit number and I'm going to place it next to the luminaire. So I'm just going to place it, somewhere around there. We don't want it to be too far away, and it's going next to the junction box. And this circuit here is actually going to be LP3-1. Now, hopefully you've read the PowerPoints for this particular sheet E2, the instructions, as well as the PowerPoint for branch circuits, and you'll know what you need to do in order to properly label these. And now that I have that, I'm basically just going to continue along and label each column. Okay, avoid overlaps wherever possible. So in this case here, I'm just going to move it so that it's not overlapping. Try and keep it consistent as much as you can, but obviously the ends, you're not going to be able to keep that consistent. But we don't want the text overlapping with the lines. That just it's not very good presentation. That's all. Now I'm probably going to speed up the camera a little bit here in order to. I'm going to do these other two rooms here. I'm going to do room 5 as well as room 4, and then I'm going to show you what to do once you have a complete three-phase branch circuit figured out. So again, we're going to be using 3 phases here. So this would represent LP3-1 would represent the first position in the panel, which would be on phase A. And then we're going to have this room here is going to be on LP3-3, which represents the second phase or second position in the panel, which is going to be phase B. And I think I'm going to place room number 4. I'm going to place that on phase C, which will be position number 5. So we're going to have LP3-1, LP3-3, and LP3-5, and they're all going to be connected through the same conduit because they're going to share common neutral. So I'm going to speed up the camera here a little bit so that you can actually, I'm not going to be doing any talking, but you can actually see now how I lay out the rest of the rooms. Okay, now I have all the room numbers labeled, or I have all the luminaires labeled, I have all the luminaires drawn, I have the conduit that goes to the junction boxes for the closest luminaire to the switch. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to join the rooms. Now these three circuits, 1, 3, and 5, are all going to be on the same conduit path because they're all going to share the same neutral. Now that's how it's going to work, is you're going to have three branches, or three circuits from each phase, A, B, and C. It's going to share the same neutral, therefore they have to be on the same conduit path. So I'm going to start at this end over here, the one furthest away, and I'm going to take a connection from this particular conductor or conduit location. I'm actually going to now run it into, let's see, how am I going to do this here? I'm going to run it this direction here, and I'm actually going to connect it using 45 degrees. Use my trim command. I'm actually going to, I'm going to connect this luminaire junction box into this luminaire junction box. Now you don't want to actually you don't want to interfere with any existing conduits, so you want to try and avoid that if at all possible. And any connection point, any junction where the conduits meet should be at a luminaire junction box or at a junction box of some sort. Okay, so now I've connected circuit 5 to circuit 3. They're going to share the same conduit path. And now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to connect circuit 3 to circuit 1. Now again, I don't want to go through like this, because then you'll lose the fact that these switches are actually in that conduit path. So I'm going to come out on a 45-degree angle, and this is where your polar tracking comes in really handy. And I'm going to come over across this way, and then I'm going to do the same thing over on the other side, and I'll just trim out the difference there, so you can see that that is actually connected through the junction box there. So now I've got a continuous conduit going through all of these luminaire junction boxes. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my home run, which is this one here, and I'm going to place it on the luminaire that's closest to the panel. Okay, so let's actually move this. That's probably it was in a good spot for it before. And I'm actually going to point it towards the panel. Our panel is going to be somewhere over here, so I'm actually going to now point it as close to, let's turn snapping off there. I'm going to point it as close to the panel as I can. Really unavoidable in this situation to have the text interfering with the luminaire, but I think that everyone will still be able to read the text and they'll still understand what's on there. But that just basically shows that I'm not going to show the actual conductor or conduit path back to the panel. That's what those home runs do, is they point to the panel, let you know which panel it's going to be on. It's also in the description, LP3, and it lets you know which circuits are actually on that panel as well. You should only have home runs that have 3 circuits on there: 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17. You get the idea. Those are going to be the circuit paths. So what you're going to do now is you're going to take all the remaining rooms and you're going to put them onto a particular circuit. So perhaps 7, 8, and 9 might exist on their own circuit as well. 12, 13, 11, 10 might be able to be on another circuit, and you might have, you're going to have 2 circuits in room 14. 3 and 2. You're just going to have to figure out what's the best way to align that or to organize that. Next thing I want to show you is how to lay out the foyer and the hallways. And also we'll get into room 14 as well. So when we're looking at the foyer is going to use these luminaires here. So let me just bring them over into the spot. Now, according to our calculations here, we're going to need 2 columns of 3 luminaires per column, or 3 columns of 2. It doesn't matter. We've got 6 luminaires total. So looking at this space, I've got the longest dimension here. Actually, I think I'm going to go with 3 columns of 2 in this situation. So again, use the same process that I did before. I'm going to draw a line from one end to the other, and I'm going to divide that line. I'm going to divide it up into equal segments. So if we have 3 actual columns here, 3 minus 1/3 is 2 2/3, and 2 2/3 is going to be 8/3. So I'm going to divide this line into 8 equal segments. Let me try that again. Number of segments is going to be 8. And I'm going to do my X line, make it horizontal. I'm going to place one here, place another one here, and the last one is going to be right there. Okay. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do the same thing, but I'm going to go from this side to this side. So now I'm going to draw another line. I'm going to draw it from here, this end here, to this end here. Now there's going to be 2 columns here. So our actual columns is 2, which means that for spacing we're going to use 1 2/3, and 1 2/3 is going to be 5/3. So I'm going to divide this line into 5 equal segments. And I'm going to create another X line. So really we have, what we have here is we have essentially 2 different directions for our grid in terms of the light locations. So let me delete the, don't need these anymore. Let me delete these. And now we have our luminaires, which are actually going to be centered now on each of these locations. Now these may be changed as well. We'll see when we get into the, when we actually get into doing the hallway, that those locations may change. But essentially that should provide us with some even lighting for room number 1, which is the foyer and the hallway combined. Next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to look at doing the hallway now. So the best way I think to do the hallway is actually to draw, we want to start with the corners. So I'm actually going to draw a line in the corners that represents sort of the, I want to be able to find the midpoint of those corners is what I want to be able to do. I won't worry about this one for now, but I want to actually take one of these luminaires and I want to place it in the midpoint of that particular one. Now you could do an X here, but essentially I'm doing the same thing. Right? I'm actually placing that now as close to the corner as possible. Let me make a copy with the center as the base point, position 1 here, and position 1 here. And for this one, I'm actually going to copy it straight up, and I'm going to try and align it to this one here. So let's see if AutoCAD will let me do it. There we go. Right now I don't need those guidelines anymore. Those really are just guidelines temporarily. So I have one at each of the corners of the hallways. Now that makes sense because it will actually throw light down both sides of the hallway. It's a very efficient way to do it. However, these lights I don't think are powerful enough to actually throw light all the way down this hallway. So I'm probably going to place another one roughly halfway in between. Now, it's not going to be roughly. I'll be able to actually get an exact calculation if I draw a line. I'm going to place another luminaire that's going to be located at about the halfway mark between those 2 luminaires. Same thing on this side, so really what I can do is I can just copy this one now that I've done that. And that will lay out this part of the hallway. Now in here it's a little bit tricky because we need to fill this hallway with lights. We need to get some lights into this hallway, but we also need to get some lights into this hallway as well. And if we were to place a light here, which would be at the intersection of these 2 hallways, it would make sense from this point of view, but it would be a little too far away for this one here. I think that there's going to be not enough light. We'll have a little dark spot sort of right about here if we were to place a light here. And we really don't want to place another light here because that kind of creates an unsymmetrical layout for the hallway. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to divide this space up into 3. So I'll draw another line, use my divide command, and I'm going to divide this, and let's see if this works here, divide it into 3 equal segments, and that's going to be the position of my other lights. Something like that. Let's delete the original, delete my points. Okay, so now we've sort of got a, somewhat of an equal spacing in this hallway, and if I want to, I can actually continue. Oh, I should learn another one here. Hang on. I'm actually going to continue this same spacing all the way down the hallway until we reach the end. Okay, so that's essentially what we're going to do there. So we have even spacing throughout that hallway. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a couple lights into this hallway here. So again, I'm going to use my divide command, just set up a little construction here so that I can actually divide that evenly. And I want to divide that into, actually I'm going to use the spacing here. So let's take a look at what the, we want 2 lights in here. And so if we divide this into 5/3 again, hopefully this will work. So 5 segments. I'm going to use my X line. Actually, I don't even need the X line here because we're just going to position these. I'm going to copy with the center of the base point. I'm going to place 1 luminaire here and 1 luminaire here and delete all the rest of my guides here. Now I think what we'll find is we'll find that for the most part this is laid out fairly efficiently, and it's also laid out fairly evenly. Rooms 12 and 13, these simply just have 2 luminaires in them. And let me show you how that looks real quick here. All right, again, we're going to use our divide command. I'm going to go from the center of the wall to the center of center, so this will actually act as both my centering and my dividing. And because we have 2 lights, then I can actually now divide by 5 to get what I need to get. So 5 for that one, and it's the same size for that one. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this, position it here, and now I'm also going to move from the midpoint there. Okay, so now that luminaire should be centered, and I'll make a copy of that from this point to this point, and delete my guides. Okay, so really easy to set this up, and now I'm just going to make a copy of this, copy from the center of this wall to the center of this wall. And now we should have even, uniform lighting in rooms 12 and 13. Again, I'm going to label my types here as well. So this is going to be type A. And I might as well make a copy of this now that I have that. Okay, and I didn't label these types, but that's okay. We're just going to do that in the main foyer. And I believe that these are actually going to be type C. So let me just change this to a type C. It could be mistaken. You want to check that. Just going off of memory. And yeah, I showed you as well how to lay out room number 11. I believe I showed you that in the PowerPoint, so you'll have that information. And room number 14, we're going to do something very similar to what we did with the foyer. So I'm actually going to draw a couple lines here. I'll draw one in this direction, and I'll draw another one in this direction. And now I'm going to divide that. Now we need 4 columns here. Essentially we want 16 lights in room 14. So we're going to need 4 columns of lights both ways. And if we have 4 columns of lights both ways, that's 3 2/3. And so if we take 3 2/3, that's really 11 thirds. We have 11 equal segments that we want to divide this room up into. So we'll take this one, divide it by 11 segments. We'll do the same thing and divide this one also by 11 segments. Do our X-line command. I'm going to start with the horizontal ones. So we'll have one here, one here, one here, and one here. And I'm going to do my X-line again, except I'm going to use the vertical version in this one. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now that essentially forms my grid. I can delete my my guides now. Being careful not to delete my room number, because I will need that later. And now I can position my lights. Now these lights are a little bit bigger. They're 22-inch luminaires. I don't really have an example of those, so I might actually just create a copy of this one, and I'll size it up a little bit in terms of the dimensions here. So let's see, it is a block, so I need to explode it. And I'm going to change now the radius of it. So it is a 22 inches, I believe, is the radius, or the diameter is 22 inches. So about 550 millimeters is, I believe, what we're looking for there. And I'm going to position this light at the intersection of all my grids. And now I can delete my my grid lines. And I might as well center that in the room as close as I can. And then, of course, you know how to do the switches and all that fun stuff. So that really gives us a very even layout. Now, again, these lights are metal halide. They are 250 watt luminaires. And because they have such a high wattage, you're going to need 2 circuits for this room. And so you're going to have 2 sets of 3-way switches in this room as well. So let me just show you what that's going to look like here. So right near the opening, you'll have to select the side for the 3-way switches. I think I'm going to use this side here because it just kind of makes the most sense to me. And we're actually going to make a copy of that. We're going to create 2 versions of it because we need 2 3-way switches around every door, or at every door here. So let me come in here, rotate this one. And so that's what it's going to look like. You're going to have 2 sets here. So one set will be connected to one group of luminaires. Now it depends how you want to set this up. You can have perhaps these back 8 luminaires here on one circuit and the front 8 on another circuit, or you could do the left 8 and the right 8 on separate circuits. Either way, you're going to have to identify which circuits using the labeling for our particular luminaires. So you're going to label them. I forgot to label these ones as well, but we're going to do the same thing, labeling these. And you can also angle this text too, if you want to. Let's see, rotation here. You can also make it a 45-degree angle if you find that you want a little bit more space. That's acceptable as well. Whatever you do, just keep it as even as possible. So if you start off doing 45s, then keep doing 45s wherever you possibly can. Okay, so just to give you a little idea there. So you're going to label each of these luminaires as well with the circuits that they're on. We have 19, so actually we probably could get away with one circuit for all of these. I know 19 is more than our maximum of 18, but again, that's just a guideline. It's not a set in stone rule, and it doesn't make sense to have one of those luminaires on a separate circuit than all the rest. Just makes sense. And essentially, we could actually, if we want to cheat it a little bit more, we'll delete that one there. Remember, this is a break line. It means that there's more building this way, and whoever's doing that part of that building, they'll have to worry about that one luminaire, maybe put it on a separate circuit starting at that point for the rest of the building. And it might even be on a different panel as well. That's it for the tips that I have for you in terms of sheet E2. The rest you're going to have to figure out yourself. Just use your best judgment wherever possible. Do it just like I did it on the examples here, and you should be fine. Good luck, everyone, and hope you have a great weekend. Email me if you have any questions.